Let's talk a little bit about freedom. Freedom is this thing that we're, uh, I guess, trying to gain in life, right? Liberation, freedom. I want to feel free. And I think something that's been a long kind of thought of mine, uh, critique, you might say, of Western, quote unquote, or you might even say, quote unquote, white culture, as as there's this conflation of freedom, or the understanding of freedom is a little bit overall, and this is a generalization, but a little bit funky, and not in a good way. A little bit distorted or something, in my view. And I have a long kind of background in being an appreciator of jazz culture, and so I want to kind of come from there a bit to talk about freedom. This sensibility, I think, people might realize this is connected through all the animist embodiment arts. Crystallized pieces of writing about freedom that I was exposed to talks about jazz, and I think when Questlove says jazz, they mean hip hop too, right? Is the expression of the black body's freedom within this structure, rigid structure. The beat, the rhythm, the constant rhythm, and the black body's freedom, expression of freedom. So it's this contrast between freedom and structure. It's even talking about Europeanism, so freedom within Europeanism. Kind of like all modern black music is a combination of European and Africanist sensibilities kind of mending together, blending. So you have this usually this consistent 4/4 beat, 4/4 2/4 beat. It's like dunce kunz dunce kunz dunce kunz. That's But underneath that there's this polyrhythmic feeling hidden underneath.
We're in the hyper context, we're in the meta context of that kind of world.
Like the like the congas, djembes, like hand drums, hidden underneath this 4/4 kind of rigid time.
If we don't recognize that meta context, we are doomed to be possessed by it.
Or it sounds like rigid time.
If we don't recognize that meta context, we are doomed to be possessed by it.
That's something that's been really formidable for me to understand. As this contrast of freedom and structure, I find really interesting. And as you dance in black musics, black cultures, I think you grow an appreciation that actually there's a transmutation of structure. The structure is used as something that's liberatory for the body, rhythmically, expression wise.
When I say things about my life, I'm talking from my fate, my lineages, my inheritances. And they're not 100% transferable, but they might be like 25% transferable if you sort of take the meta context and say, how do I play with this idea? How do I play with this practice? And then you actually have to play with it. You can't just be like, oh, I absorbed this idea and now I know it and I own it and it's mine. And it doesn't work that way.
In Asian somatics culture, there's a relationship between freedom and discipline. One way this is understood is the concept of shizen, or shizentai. Shizen means natural. or it in the kind of like the characters, it breaks down to the self that manifests as itself, something like that. Tai is body, so natural body, the body manifesting as itself, as it is.
Everyone has a visceral sense of gravity, and everyone has a visceral sense of levity. We all have that. Even in dreams, there is a sense of gravity and levity. Otherwise, how would you know when you were flying? There would be no way to know if you were flying versus swimming or walking or being dragged around by a demon if you didn't have a visceral sense of gravity and levity, and how if you just lessen gravity, it becomes levity. And if you just decrease levity, it becomes gravity. So really, they're the same thing. They're the same beast. They have different visceral effects depending on how intense they are. Intensity. So this is another reality we have to work with, is what the fuck is intensity, and how do we know what it is, and why is it so relative and different for every single person in every different context?
Key point here. And Asian martial arts practices from also to any kind of somatic practices from Asia, there's this idea of connecting heaven to earth through the body. So that is through your Taijipo, that runs through the crown of your head, all the way through the root. It's a pole that runs. And this central channel, anchored in your dantian, in your lower dantian, that is your hara. So that's your pelvis, abdomen center, runs through there as the center of the body. This
is why it's very important to have what I call it like zoom in, zoom out. Or like, how does the macro apply to the micro, and how does the micro apply to the macro? Which is to say that all ideas are nothing. They're just kind of fluff until they're grounded in the container of the self, until they meet gravity and can live on the earth and walk around and make actions and choices and apply those ideas to bodily, visceral events.
Is how humans, sensing that is how humans manifest their natural manifestation of self. But it is through discipline you gain that. Strange, right? This is the paradox. You humans, to be natural, need to actually discipline and have structure.
Yeah. Yeah. Testing. Let's do the thing.
What I find is that a lot of Westernist somatics applications kind of ignore this part, or kind of are in a different developmental stage. Because when you talk about the person who is manifesting themselves as naturally as they can, but through disciplining, this is a person who has been in a life process that has some rigor.
Woo! Fire. Light it up. And the yummy incense as the people trickle in. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you all for listening. Blessings to all beings.
The paradox between discipline and freedom in the body, discipline in the body and freedom in the body are connected together, right? And this is something actually that's woefully missing as a concept in Westernist somatics. There is, and I think we see this because I find, I'm just going to be plain honest, that in Westernist somatics culture, there's a lot of exploration of impulse, but it's a little bit like there isn't a skill being built. There's a lot of sprawl of impulse, unfurling of impulse. And, yes, there is some shaping of skill, but it's like,
The point I'm just trying to make is that like I'm in a culture of hyper abstraction and decontextualization. And I'm talking, which is using a language, using an English language that is usually used in a decontextual way to promote abstractions that don't live on the ground.
This is neither titration or annihilation, but it can hold both these extremes, because you can be like annihilation, titration, that is modulating. You're playing. You have a bandwidth that you're playing with, and you can do that with your nervous system.
So the only difference between someone who thinks that healing has to happen before it happens is someone who doesn't quite yet understand that what we call healing is feeling something.
And that's a lot of what Dare is currently talking about. They have their own way of speaking.
We as a culture have sort of taken the medicine of individuality and independence in its extreme state of extreme polarity.
But I really invite you to go check out the Underworld podcast series. So that you can get that at bodyalter.org, and you can look under Underworld Party and see their series. And the one that's relevant is Time as Erotic Chi.
And in certain practices like Taoism, you're actually learning to feel things that you can't feel. This is Scooter McDuder with Underworld Party 5. Let's see if we can make a bigger mess than last time. In a way that allows you to understand that it's always happening and it's always available. That's all it is.